Emma Walsh pressed her palms against the cool bathroom sink and stared at her reflection. The mirror showed a woman who looked put together on the outside, but inside she felt like scattered pieces of glass trying to hold a shape. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Just dinner. Just one evening to prove to Rachel that she was fine, that the breakup with David hadn't broken something fundamental inside her. But nothing felt simple anymore. 6 months had passed since David walked out of her apartment with those final words still hanging in the air like poison. He had called her naive, too trusting, too pure for the real world. The word pure had sounded like an insult coming from his mouth, as if her honesty and openness were character flaws rather than virtues. The relationship had left her feeling exposed and foolish, like someone who had brought a knife to a gunfight without realizing a battle was even happening. Rachel had cornered her last Tuesday at the clinic where they both worked. The conversation started innocently enough, about a patient's recovery progress, but then shifted with the determined warmth of a friend who refused to watch someone they loved disappear into themselves. Rachel mentioned a man named Nathan, someone her cousin knew from a business conference. He was new to the city, kept to himself, and apparently needed to meet people who existed outside boardrooms and investment portfolios. Emma had made every excuse she could think of. She was too busy with her caseload. She wasn't ready. Dating felt like walking through a minefield while wearing a blindfold. But Rachel had that look in her eyes, the one that said she would keep pushing until Emma either agreed or moved to another state. So Emma agreed, not because she wanted to, but because sometimes surrender was easier than resistance. Now, standing in front of her closet, Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. If she was going to do this, she would do it on her own terms. She would build a wall so high that no man could climb it without revealing exactly who he was first. The lie formed in her mind with startling clarity, a shield made of words designed to push away anyone looking for something she had learned she could not safely give. The Ocean View restaurant sat on a quiet street where the smell of salt water mixed with jasmine from the gardens nearby. Emma arrived exactly on time, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Through the windows, she could see a man sitting alone at a corner table, his posture relaxed but attentive. He wasn't looking at his phone like most people did while waiting. Instead, he seemed content to simply exist in the moment, watching the other diners with quiet interest. Nathan Cross stood when she approached, and Emma noticed immediately that his smile reached his eyes. He was tall but not imposing, dressed in simple dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked expensive without trying to announce it. His handshake was firm and brief, the gesture of someone who understood boundaries. They ordered water and wine, made small talk about traffic and the weather, the usual dance of two strangers trying to find solid ground. Nathan asked about her work, and Emma found herself talking more freely than she had expected. She told him about the clinic, about helping people rebuild strength after injuries and surgeries, about the particular satisfaction of watching someone take their first independent steps after months of struggle. He listened in a way that felt genuine, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually processing what she said rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. When he spoke about his own work, he kept it vague, mentioning something about medical technology and innovation, the kind of answer that gave information without really revealing anything. The conversation flowed easily enough, but Emma felt the familiar tightness building in her chest. This was the moment that always came, when things started feeling comfortable and expectations began forming like storm clouds on the horizon. She had practiced the words in her car, repeated them silently while applying lipstick, built them into a weapon that would end this before it could truly begin. Emma set down her wine glass and met Nathan's eyes directly. Her voice came out steadier than she felt inside. She told him plainly that she wasn't a virgin, that she had a past, that she wasn't the kind of woman men took home to meet their mothers or built futures around. The words felt harsh in her own mouth, a deliberate ugliness meant to reveal the truth she believed about how the world worked. She waited for the familiar sequence of reactions. The slight pulling back, the polite smile that didn't quite hide disappointment, the sudden remembering of an early morning meeting. She had seen it before, that moment when a man's interest cooled like coffee left too long on a table. Nathan's expression didn't change in any of the ways she expected. He didn't lean back or look away. Instead, he held her gaze with something that looked almost like sadness, not for himself but for her. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that caught her completely off guard. He said that he wasn't interested in buying virtue or collecting innocence like some kind of trophy. He told her that a person's worth had nothing to do with their sexual history, that he had lived long enough to know that purity culture was just another way to control and diminish women. His words came without preaching or performance, just simple statements of belief delivered as casually as someone might comment on the weather. Emma felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she hadn't even realized she had built. The heat rose behind her eyes, not from shame but from the shocking relief of being met with acceptance instead of judgment. Around them, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm, glasses clinking and conversations humming, while Emma sat frozen in a moment that felt like it was rewriting something fundamental about what she believed was possible. They kept talking after that, the conversation shifting into deeper waters. Nathan asked what drew her to physical therapy, and Emma found herself sharing stories she rarely told anyone. She talked about her first patient out of graduate school, a young veteran who had lost his leg and his faith in the world at the same time. She described the slow process of helping him trust his prosthetic, the small victories that felt like miracles, the day he walked his daughter down the aisle at her wedding. Nathan listened with the kind of attention that felt like a gift. He didn't interrupt with his own stories or try to one-up her experiences. He simply made space for her words and received them with respect. When she asked about his work again, he opened up slightly more, talking about the frustration of trying to bring new medical devices to market, about the bureaucracy that stood between innovation and the patients who needed it. There was something in the way he spoke that suggested he understood struggle from the inside, not as an observer but as someone who had fought his own battles. Emma noticed the way his jaw tightened slightly when he mentioned regulatory challenges, the brief flash of something harder beneath his calm exterior. As the evening stretched longer than either had planned, Nathan asked if she would like to take a walk. The beach was close enough to hear, and the night was warm with that particular softness that only coastal cities knew. Emma surprised herself by saying yes without hesitation. They walked along the boardwalk where tourists took photos and locals moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged. Nathan matched his pace to hers without being asked, another small gesture that spoke of consideration rather than calculation. Emma found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't allowed herself to in months, the constant vigilance easing just enough to let real conversation through. She told him about her family, about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, about the scholarship that let her escape to college and the determination that carried her through graduate school. Nathan shared pieces of his own story, about parents who had pushed him toward medicine before he found his own path, about the loneliness that sometimes came with success. As they reached the end of the boardwalk, Nathan turned to face her. He said he had enjoyed the evening more than he could remember enjoying anything in a long time. He asked if he could see her again, and the question came without pressure or assumption, just an honest inquiry that left space for any answer. Emma heard herself saying yes before her protective instincts could intervene. They exchanged numbers, made tentative plans for coffee later in the week, performed the small rituals of a connection that wanted to continue. When Nathan walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her or push for more. He simply thanked her for her time and honesty, the word honesty landing with an irony that Emma felt like a stone in her stomach. She drove home through streets lit by street lamps and neon signs, her mind replaying the evening in fractured pieces. The lie she had told felt different now, not like the shield she had intended but like a wall she had built between herself and something that might actually be real. Nathan's response had undermined everything she thought she knew about how men worked, about what they wanted and what they could handle. In her apartment, Emma sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her phone. A text from Rachel asked how it went, but Emma couldn't find words to answer. How could she explain that the man she had tried to push away had instead pulled her closer with nothing more than kindness and respect? How could she describe the feeling of being seen as a whole person rather than a collection of parts to be judged and measured? What Emma couldn't know, was that the quiet man who had listened without judgment carried secrets that would soon transform everything she thought she understood about her carefully controlled life. The foundations were already shifting beneath her feet, and the real story was only just beginning. The coffee shop Rachel had recommended sat 3 blocks from the clinic, close enough that Emma could walk there on her lunch break. She had agreed to meet Nathan again, telling herself it was just coffee, just conversation, nothing that required the kind of emotional investment that could leave scars. But as she pushed through the glass door and saw him already seated near the window, 2 cups steaming on the table between empty chairs, she felt something shift in her chest that contradicted all her careful reasoning. Nathan smiled when he saw her, the kind of smile that looked like genuine pleasure rather than practiced charm. He had ordered her a latte without asking, somehow guessing correctly, and the small presumption should have annoyed her but instead felt oddly comforting. They fell into conversation easily, picking up threads from their first meeting as if no time had passed at all. Emma talked about her morning at the clinic, about the elderly woman who had finally regained enough strength to live independently again, about the small triumphs that made her job feel like something more than just work. Nathan listened with that same focused attention she remembered, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding rather than just filling silence. When she turned the questions back to him, Nathan spoke about his company in broader strokes. He mentioned developing medical devices, about the challenge of balancing innovation with safety regulations, about the satisfaction of seeing something move from concept to reality. His answers felt deliberately vague, and Emma noticed the way he steered conversations away from specifics, but she attributed it to modesty or perhaps professional discretion. What she couldn't ignore were the interruptions. His phone buzzed constantly throughout their conversation, the screen lighting up with names and numbers he glanced at with visible tension. Each time it happened, Nathan would apologize, silence the device, and redirect his attention back to her. But Emma saw the tightness around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried a weight that seemed to grow heavier with each ignored call. The pattern continued over the next 2 weeks. They met for walks along the beach, for quiet dinners at small restaurants where the lighting was soft and the crowds were manageable. Each time, Emma felt herself opening up in ways she hadn't planned to, sharing stories about her past, her hopes, the fears she usually kept locked away. And each time, Nathan's phone would intrude with its persistent demands, pulling his attention towards something he never quite explained. Emma started noticing other things too. The way expensive cars would slow down when they passed, drivers glancing out with recognition before continuing on. The manner in which waiters and hosts treated Nathan with a deference that went beyond normal courtesy. The occasional stranger who would approach with familiar warmth, using his first name as if they had known him for years, speaking in shorthand about meetings and decisions that clearly carried significant weight. At the clinic, the atmosphere began shifting in ways Emma couldn't quite define. A new administrator had been hired, a sharp woman named Victoria Chen who seemed more interested in office politics than patient care. Victoria started asking Emma questions that felt intrusive, inquiring about her personal life with a persistence that went beyond friendly curiosity. During a staff meeting, Victoria mentioned that the clinic needed to be mindful of its public image, that any negative attention could affect funding and community trust. The comment seemed general enough, but Emma noticed the way Victoria's eyes lingered on her when she said it, a pointed look that felt like an accusation waiting to be spoken aloud. Rachel pulled Emma aside after the meeting, her expression troubled. She said that people were talking, that someone had seen Emma with a man who looked important, that rumors were starting to circulate about who he might be. Emma laughed it off, insisting that Nathan was just someone she was getting to know, nothing serious or complicated. But Rachel's concern planted seeds of doubt that began growing in the spaces between Emma's thoughts. The first real warning came on a Tuesday afternoon. Emma was walking to her car after her last session when a man approached from the parking lot. He was middle-aged, wearing a suit that looked both expensive and deliberately understated, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who rarely heard the word no. He called Emma by name, which immediately set off alarm bells. She stopped walking but didn't move closer, maintaining the distance her instincts demanded. The man smiled pleasantly and introduced himself as a journalist working on a story about influential people in the medical technology sector. He said he had some questions about her relationship with Nathan Cross, and he would appreciate a few minutes of her time. The name landed like a physical blow. Nathan Cross. Not just Nathan, the quiet man who listened and laughed and made her feel safe, but Nathan Cross, a name that apparently carried enough weight to warrant investigation. Emma declined politely but firmly, saying she had no comment and asking the man to leave. He handed her a business card anyway, suggesting she might change her mind, and walked away with the unhurried pace of someone who believed time was on his side. Emma sat in her car with trembling hands, the business card feeling like a grenade in her pocket. She pulled out her phone and searched the name Nathan Cross, something she realized with sudden shame she had never thought to do before. The results flooded her screen with overwhelming clarity. Nathan Cross, founder and CEO of Crosstech Medical Innovations. Net worth estimated in the billions. Revolutionary work in prosthetic technology and neural interface devices. Youngest person to win the Breakthrough Prize in Life Sciences. Photographs of him at charity galas, speaking at medical conferences, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Emma felt the world tilt sideways. Every conversation replayed in her memory with new context. The ignored phone calls were probably board members and investors. The expensive cars belonged to people in his orbit. The deference from strangers made perfect sense when you were one of the most influential people in medical technology. She drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning through implications and questions. Why hadn't he told her? What did it mean that he had let her believe he was just a regular person working a regular job? Was she just another experiment for him, a way to experience normalcy before returning to his real life? That evening, Nathan called as he usually did around dinner time. Emma answered but couldn't keep the strain from her voice. She asked him directly if there was something he needed to tell her, if there was any reason a journalist might be asking questions about their relationship. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Emma thought the call had dropped. When Nathan finally spoke, his voice carried a heaviness she hadn't heard before. He said that he had wanted to tell her sooner, that he had been trying to find the right moment, that he had hoped they could build something real before the complications of his public life made everything harder. Emma asked him point blank if he was Nathan Cross, the billionaire founder of Crosstech Medical. Nathan confirmed it without hesitation, apologizing for the omission, explaining that people treated him differently once they knew, that he had treasured the way she looked at him as just a man rather than a net worth statement. The explanation made sense intellectually, but emotionally Emma felt betrayed. She told him she needed time to think, to process what this meant for whatever was developing between them. Nathan didn't argue. He simply said he understood and that he would be there whenever she was ready to talk. Emma spent a sleepless night staring at her ceiling, her mind unable to settle. The lie she had told on their first date kept returning to haunt her. She had built a wall with false confessions, trying to protect herself from judgment, while Nathan had built his own wall of omission, trying to protect himself from being reduced to his wealth. They had both approached each other with shields raised, both afraid of being hurt for different reasons. The next morning at the clinic, Emma knew immediately that something had changed. Coworkers who usually greeted her warmly now offered tight smiles and quick glances before looking away. The receptionist handed her a note saying that Victoria wanted to see her before she started her sessions. Victoria's office was small and meticulously organized, every surface clear except for a single folder placed prominently in the center of her desk. She invited Emma to sit with professional courtesy that barely concealed something harder underneath. Victoria said that the clinic had become aware of media interest in one of their employees, that several journalists had called asking for comments, that the board was concerned about potential disruptions. Emma listened with growing anger as Victoria danced around the actual accusation. Finally, Victoria asked directly if Emma was involved with Nathan Cross, and if so, whether she had considered how that relationship might affect the clinic's reputation and funding sources. The question was phrased as concern, but Emma heard the threat underneath. She responded that her personal life was her own business, that she had done nothing wrong, and that she would not be intimidated into ending a relationship because someone with money had taken an interest in her. Victoria's expression hardened, and she suggested that Emma think carefully about her priorities and whether her position at the clinic aligned with her current choices. Emma left the office feeling like she had been punched. She made it through her morning sessions on professional autopilot, her body going through the familiar motions while her mind reeled. During lunch, she found Rachel waiting for her in the break room, concern written across her face. Rachel had heard about the meeting with Victoria. She had also heard that photographers had been spotted near the clinic, that online forums were speculating about Nathan Cross's mystery girlfriend, that the story was gaining momentum in ways that would be hard to control. Rachel urged Emma to talk to Nathan, to figure out together how to handle the attention before it consumed everything. Emma knew Rachel was right, but the thought of facing Nathan felt overwhelming. How could they have a normal conversation when nothing about their situation was normal anymore? How could she trust that his feelings were real when his entire life existed on a scale she couldn't comprehend? That afternoon, as Emma was leaving the clinic through the back entrance, she found Nathan waiting by her car. He looked different somehow, or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time. The casual clothes couldn't hide the expensive watch on his wrist or the way he carried himself with the unconscious confidence of someone used to commanding rooms. He apologized for showing up unannounced, but said he needed to see her, to talk face to face rather than through filtered phone conversations. Emma unlocked her car but didn't get in, using the open door as a barrier between them. She asked him what he wanted from her, what he thought could possibly happen between a physical therapist and a billionaire that wouldn't end in disaster. Nathan's response was immediate and unflinching. He said he wanted exactly what he had wanted from the beginning, to know her as a person, to build something genuine, to find someone who saw him rather than his bank account. He admitted that hiding his identity had been selfish, but insisted that his feelings were entirely real. Emma felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. She told him that she understood why he had kept his secret, that she had done the same thing in her own way on their first date. But understanding didn't erase the complication they now faced, the media attention already destroying her peace, the pressure from her workplace that threatened her career. Nathan stepped closer, not touching but present in a way that felt solid and certain. He said that if she wanted, he could make the attention disappear, that he had lawyers and publicists who specialized in managing these situations, that he would do whatever it took to protect her from the chaos his life created. The offer was meant kindly, but Emma heard the implication underneath, the power dynamic that would always exist between them if she accepted his protection. She told him no. She said that if they were going to try to make this work, it had to be as equals, that she wouldn't hide behind his money or his influence, that she needed to face whatever came on her own terms. Nathan looked at her with something that might have been admiration or might have been concern, but he nodded acceptance. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, they stood in the parking lot and talked about what came next. Nathan warned her that the media attention would likely get worse before it got better, that people would dig into her past, that strangers would feel entitled to opinions about their relationship. Emma acknowledged the fear those possibilities created, but also recognized that running from them wouldn't make them disappear. They agreed to talk again soon, to figure out together how to navigate the storm that was building around them. As Nathan walked back to his car, a modest sedan that Emma now realized was probably worth more than her annual salary, she watched him go with a mixture of emotions too complicated to name. That night, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a link to an article posted just minutes earlier. The headline read, "Crosstech billionaire Nathan Cross spotted with San Diego physical therapist, relationship status unknown." Below it was a photograph taken from a distance, showing Nathan and Emma standing by her car, the image grainy but unmistakable. Emma stared at the screen as notifications began multiplying, messages from friends and acquaintances asking if the story was true, reporters requesting interviews, strangers offering opinions she hadn't asked for. The private world she had carefully constructed around herself was crumbling in real time, exposed to scrutiny she had never wanted and never invited. She thought about the lie she had told Nathan on their first date, the protective shield she had built from words meant to push people away. Now she faced a different kind of exposure, not chosen but forced, her life becoming public property because she had dared to care about someone whose existence played out on a public stage. Emma turned off her phone and sat in the darkness of her apartment, listening to her own breathing and the distant sound of traffic. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new ways to test whether what she and Nathan had found together was strong enough to survive in the light. But tonight, she simply let herself feel the weight of everything that was changing, knowing that once the sun rose, there would be no going back to the safety of anonymity. The photograph appeared everywhere overnight. Emma woke to find it on news sites, gossip blogs, and social media platforms she didn't even use. Someone had created a hashtag that was already trending, strangers debating the validity of their relationship, speculating about her motives, reducing her entire existence to a footnote in Nathan Cross's public narrative. She got ready for work with mechanical precision, choosing clothes that felt like armor, pulling her hair back in a way that suggested control even as she felt everything spinning apart. The drive to the clinic usually calmed her, the familiar route providing structure and routine. Today it felt like driving toward a firing squad. The photographers were waiting when she arrived. 3 of them clustered near the entrance, cameras raised the moment her car turned into the parking lot. Emma kept her eyes forward and walked with deliberate calm, refusing to run or hide even as every instinct screamed at her to do exactly that. Questions flew at her from multiple directions, asking about Nathan, about their relationship, about whether she had known who he was, about whether his money had been the attraction. Inside the clinic, the atmosphere was toxic. Co-workers who usually joked with her during breaks now watched with barely concealed judgment. The whispers followed her down hallways, never quite loud enough to confront but always present. Emma focused on her patients, the one part of her life that still made sense, throwing herself into therapy sessions with fierce concentration. Around mid-morning, the clinic director Patricia Moore summoned Emma to her office. Patricia was a stern woman in her 60s who had built the clinic from nothing and protected it with maternal ferocity. She didn't waste time on pleasantries, gesturing for Emma to sit and then sliding a tablet across the desk. The screen showed 3 different articles, all published within the last 12 hours. The headlines ranged from curious to accusatory, questioning whether a clinic that served vulnerable veterans should employ someone who attracted media scrutiny, suggesting that Emma's relationship represented a conflict of interest, implying that she might be using patient stories to make herself more appealing to a wealthy philanthropist. Emma read with growing fury. None of it was true, but the insinuations were crafted carefully enough to plant doubt. Patricia asked Emma directly whether the relationship with Nathan Cross was serious, whether Emma had considered the impact on the clinic, whether she understood that nonprofit funding depended heavily on public perception. Emma met Patricia's gaze without flinching. She said that her personal life was her own, that she had done nothing unethical or inappropriate, that she refused to apologize for caring about someone just because that person happened to be wealthy. Patricia sighed, looking older and more tired than Emma had ever seen her. She said that the board was meeting that evening to discuss the situation, that Emma should prepare herself for difficult conversations, that sometimes doing the right thing personally required sacrifices professionally. The threat was clear even if the words stayed diplomatic. Emma left the office feeling hollowed out, the injustice of it burning in her throat. She had worked hard to build her career, to earn respect in her field, and now it was all threatened because she had committed the crime of being photographed with the wrong person. During her lunch break, Emma finally called Nathan. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with concern. He had seen the articles, had his lawyers already drafting cease and desist letters, had been trying to reach her all morning. Emma cut through his explanations and asked him a simple question that had been burning in her mind since she woke up. She asked if he had any idea what it felt like to have your entire life dissected by strangers, to become a character in someone else's story without permission. Nathan was quiet for a moment before admitting that he did know, that he had lived with that scrutiny for years, but acknowledging that his experience didn't diminish hers. He offered again to use his resources to shut down the media attention, to make the whole thing disappear. Emma told him that wasn't the point, that running from this wouldn't change the fundamental problem of their different worlds. Their conversation ended without resolution, both frustrated and neither sure how to bridge the gap between good intentions and terrible circumstances. Emma returned to work feeling more alone than she had in months, questioning whether the connection she had felt with Nathan was worth the destruction it seemed to bring. The afternoon brought another unwelcome development. Victoria appeared in the therapy room during one of Emma's sessions, apologizing for the interruption but insisting she needed to speak with Emma immediately. In the hallway, Victoria informed her that the board had moved up their meeting and wanted Emma present that evening. Emma finished her shift in a daze, her mind already cycling through possible outcomes. She could lose her job, could be forced to choose between her career and her relationship, could become a cautionary tale about the dangers of dating outside your social class. The unfairness of it made her want to scream, but she channeled the rage into cold determination instead. The board meeting took place in a conference room Emma had only entered once before, during her job interview 3 years ago. 5 board members sat around a polished table, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile. Patricia sat at the head, her face carefully neutral. They asked Emma to explain her relationship with Nathan Cross. She did so honestly, describing how they had met, how neither had been looking for anything serious, how genuine feelings had developed despite complicated circumstances. She explained that she had not known about Nathan's wealth initially, that she had not sought media attention, that she had done nothing to compromise her professional responsibilities. One board member, a retired colonel named Thomas Wright, asked whether Emma understood that the clinic's reputation depended on public trust, that donors might question their judgment if employees became tabloid fodder. Emma responded that she understood perfectly, and that she also understood the hypocrisy of an organization that claimed to support veterans being willing to sacrifice an employee for the crime of being noticed. The room went very quiet. Patricia intervened, suggesting they take a short break before continuing. During the recess, Emma stepped outside for air and found Nathan standing in the parking lot, leaning against his car. She should have been surprised but somehow wasn't. He said that Rachel had called him, worried about Emma facing the board alone, and that he had come because he couldn't stand doing nothing. Emma felt frustration and relief in equal measure. She told him that his being here would only make things worse, that the board would see it as proof she was too distracted by her personal life. Nathan responded that maybe it was time to stop trying to manage everyone else's perceptions and start being honest about what they wanted. He asked Emma point-blank if she wanted to continue their relationship knowing the complications it brought. Emma realized that despite everything, despite the chaos and judgment and professional threats, her answer was yes. The board reconvened with Patricia announcing that Nathan Cross had requested permission to address them. Several members objected, but Patricia overruled them, saying they should hear all perspectives before making decisions. Nathan entered the conference room with the quiet authority of someone used to high-stakes negotiations. He spoke for less than 5 minutes but his words carried weight. He explained that Emma had no responsibility for the media attention, that she had in fact actively discouraged his attempts to use his influence to shield her, that she had insisted on facing consequences rather than hide behind his resources. He pointed out the irony of a clinic potentially punishing an employee for a relationship with someone whose company had donated millions to veterans' medical research. Then Nathan did something that surprised everyone. He offered to establish a permanent endowment for the clinic, enough to ensure stable funding regardless of public opinion or donor whims. The only condition was that the clinic judged Emma on her professional merits rather than her personal life. The offer was strategic but also genuine, a recognition that money could solve some problems even if it created others. The board members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the calculations happening behind their eyes. Patricia thanked Nathan for his time and asked him to wait outside. After he left, she turned to Emma and asked what she wanted, what outcome she hoped for from this impossible situation. Emma took a breath that steadied her voice and said she wanted to keep doing her job, that she wanted to be treated fairly, that she refused to apologize for caring about someone who happened to be wealthy. She also said that if the board felt they needed to fire her to protect the clinic's image, she would accept that decision and find another way to serve the veterans who needed her skills. Patricia studied Emma with an expression that might have been respect. She called for a vote, and to Emma's shock, the board voted to take no disciplinary action. The decision came with strings, a requirement that Emma maintain professional boundaries and avoid bringing media attention to the clinic intentionally, but it was a victory nonetheless. Emma walked out of the conference room feeling like she had survived something fundamental. Nathan was waiting in the parking lot, trying and failing to look casual. She crossed the distance between them and did something she had been holding back for weeks. She kissed him, not caring who might see or photograph or judge. When they separated, Nathan looked at her with an expression that held relief and hope and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. He said they should probably talk, really talk, about what came next and how to navigate a relationship when one person lived in the public eye. Emma agreed but suggested they do it somewhere private, away from cameras and judgment. They drove separately to Nathan's house, a sprawling property overlooking the ocean that somehow managed to feel warm despite its size. In the living room with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sunset, they finally had the conversation both had been avoiding. Emma confessed that the lie she had told on their first date had been a shield, built from fear and past hurt, designed to push away anyone who might judge her. Nathan admitted that he had known it was a lie almost immediately, that something in her delivery had felt rehearsed, but that he had respected her need for protection enough not to challenge it. The revelation should have made Emma angry but instead made her laugh, a release of tension that turned into tears that turned into honest conversation. They talked about the power imbalance his wealth created, about the ways media attention could poison genuine connection, about whether two people from different worlds could build something real together. Nathan was honest about the challenges. He said that his life involved obligations and expectations that wouldn't change, that there would always be people trying to get close to him for the wrong reasons, that the scrutiny would never completely disappear. But he also said that Emma was the first person in years who had made him feel like more than a net worth statement, who had argued with him and challenged him and refused his easy solutions. Emma responded that she wasn't interested in being saved or protected, that if they were going to make this work it had to be as partners who respected each other's strength and autonomy. Nathan agreed without hesitation, saying that was exactly what he wanted, someone who would stand beside him rather than behind him. As night fell over the ocean, they made tentative plans for how to move forward. Nathan would be more transparent about his world, introducing Emma to the parts of his life he had kept separate. Emma would stop hiding behind protective lies, allowing herself to be vulnerable in ways that terrified her. They both acknowledged that the path ahead would be difficult, that mistakes were inevitable, that there were no guarantees. But sitting together as the stars emerged overhead, they also acknowledged something else. What they had found felt rare and worth fighting for, worth the inconvenience of judgment and the cost of public scrutiny. It wasn't the fairy tale ending that romance stories promised, but something more complicated and more real. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Nathan learned to navigate their relationship with deliberate honesty. The media attention gradually faded as newer scandals captured public interest. The clinic received its endowment with Nathan publicly clarifying it had no connection to Emma's employment. Rachel teased Emma mercilessly about dating a billionaire while also fiercely defending her friend from anyone who suggested ulterior motives. Emma never forgot the lie she had told on that first date, the shield she had built from fear and past pain. But she also learned that vulnerability, the terrifying act of letting someone see you completely, was the only way to build something genuine. Nathan had looked past her defenses and seen someone worth knowing, and Emma had done the same for him, seeing the man beneath the net worth and the headlines. Their story didn't end with a dramatic gesture or a perfect resolution. Instead, it continued in the everyday moments of building a life together, navigating challenges with honesty, choosing each other again and again despite the complications. Emma learned that true partnership meant allowing someone to see your fears without using them as weapons. And Nathan learned that real connection required showing up not as a savior but as an equal, bringing resources when needed but offering presence always. The lie that could have pushed him away instead became the foundation of their truth, a reminder that everyone carries shields, and that love begins when two people are brave enough to set them down.